chocolate isn't the answer. Could you repeat the question? Hello, I'm Pat Coakley, and welcome to PodSnacks Art of the Diet, the weekly podcast that each week tries to ask the right question about how to maintain a significant weight loss. You can access all the episodes on www.artofthediet.com. Hey, this is Pat Coakley, and this is episode 142, I think. 142. And I'm outside because being inside and listening to the leaf blower and the lawnmower is just simply not good background music. So I'm sitting on a bench that's in a sort of wooded walkway that goes to the industrial park where I walk usually once the weather has turned, and it is beginning to turn. So for part of this, I'm going to be walking around and you'll hear birds and God knows what else. But I wanted to talk this week about an article that I came across that was written in 2012, but actually was probably the more succinct version of later studies that I've read. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it because it just seems to me that whenever I'm on a forum or listening to myself, my own self-talk, it is the specter of regaining the weight is always there. And as we well know, because we've all done it multiple times, at least most of my listeners, and I think to myself, I'm 9 years now, thinking, I'm tired of this. I'm just simply tired of this. And I seem to be eating more bread, for example, than normal. And, I'm like, what is going on? And when I look at how many steps I do in a day, and I compared like the last 2 weeks, and I'm like averaging 11,000, 12,000. Now for me, when I first started losing weight, if I had 4,000, it was an active day. And that was partly because I had knee pain. And I said to myself, wow, I am not going to be able to lose weight and exercise. I'm going to have to do it all just by strict tracking. And that's, of course, how I did it for the first 7 months, because really doing any exercise or walking was not part of my deal. So I was very strict with the tracking and with the points. And that was the old plan with Weight Watchers, where you could sort of compensate for your points by the amount of exercise you did. And I laugh now because if I were factoring in the exercise points that I now do, I could be eating, till the cows come home. But theoretically, I would have compensated, but my metabolism is really, really not on my side. And so anyway, let me talk about this article because it's titled "Regaining Lost Weight? ? Your hormones may be the culprit." And hold on, because it's not the usual hormone talk that us ladies are used to. And it basically is a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine about dieters who regain weight. And their conclusion was that they are not simply backsliding into old eating habits. They're battling biology itself, which tends to fight to keep the weight on. And while they say more research needs to be done, they basically say the hormones that kick in once you've lost weight both slow your metabolism and make you feel hungrier than before. In the study, one hormone, leptin, dropped as soon as the subjects lost weight. And when leptin falls, hunger swells and metabolism stalls. Oh, great, I say. The combination of increasing appetite and slowing metabolism is a double whammy for people looking to keep weight off. And after a year, leptin levels were still lower than they were when the study began, only increasing as the subjects got heavier and regained the weight. And even worse, a year out, other hunger-provoking hormones, such as Gherlin, which is spelled Ghrelin, were altered in ways that left participants with bigger appetites than at the study's start. So, for all the world, it looked like your body wants to keep you heavy. And, they speculate that, perhaps being too thin at one point in our evolution was a disadvantage that threatened survival and reproductive abilities of ancestors. But they can only speculate. But what it is disheartening. And I really find this disheartening. But what I really know is that I have known this, if not the scientific basis for it, I have known it intuitively since year 2 of maintaining the weight. When I realized that I was now increasing exercise, doing steps, and doing more than somebody my age or whatever, and it did not seem to be making a difference. I certainly couldn't equivocate it out as the Weight Watcher plan once suggested that you could do. And so when I read this study, or not this particular one, but references to it over the years, I said, you know what? That really is the basis, I think, for how many of us regain the lost weight. But we're always thinking we've failed at it. We know exactly what we need to do, but then we don't do it, or we don't do it in the right combination, or something. We just can't put our finger on it. And I think for me, it's a sobering thought to realize that it's not just my evil twin that is suggesting that I just go for the bread or go for this and, I'll make up for it next day. It really is my body trying to trick me. And when I see the numbers of the last 2 weeks with the average of 11,000 steps, 12,000 steps, and I basically do them in 3 intervals of 20 minutes or a half hour, morning, midday, and later in the evening. And in the bad weather, I do it in indoor track, and when it's not too cold, I do it outside. But I work at home, and so I'm constantly sitting down and in front of the computer or reading or something, so I have to get up and go. And this has been one of those additions to my life that I've really not negotiated with. I enjoy it. I use it for a variety of head clearing reasons, as well as listening to podcasts or, like here I am doing the podcast. I've done other podcasts while I've been walking in the early morning. Um, so when I see the kind of activity that I do, and I realize that not only am I not losing weight, which is absolutely what it would have happened had I been doing this kind of exercise in the early years of my weight loss, but I am really seeing at 73 that the metabolism thing is really slowing down, and there's just no way around it. I am going to have to eat less. That is the only way to face these facts without it being disheartening. And this is something I can do. Portions and all of that stuff, they add up and they make a difference. And it's not just denying yourself. You're just really trying to pay attention to the portions. But that's what I'm going to do this week for sure, and try to really just keep the processed, not the processed carbs, because I guess the whole wheat bread isn't processed, but just keeping it to one portion a day, not twice a day, and not oh well, I'll have it'll slice it a bit thicker than the normal piece of bread. Oh my God, there are so many different ways to get around the limits. But this study, I think, even though it's disheartening, and I think it explains what we've all seen in our own lives and in the lives of others. And it's not just somebody my age. We see it with younger people too, who lose the weight, really, really have a struggle doing it, but do it, and then are feeling so defeated a year later with it creeping back on, and they're like eye rolling, going, how can I allow myself to do this again? And you know what? Here's the reason. Your body really doesn't like you at this lower weight. And it sounds perverse, but I'm not going to try to figure it out. And all I know is that I've experienced this and I've made fun of it. I remember doing several podcast episodes on uh, my evil twin, likening it to Beyonce's performance personality. She calls Sasha fierce. I guess she feels she's very shy in life, but when she gets on the stage, she's Sasha fierce. And so, I have my evil twin sister, but now I'm looking at leptin and Gherlin, and I think those are the names, these hormones that really account for the kind of battle. And it is an uphill battle. There is just no mistaking this. We may have days that are on, flat ground, or it may seem like the wind is at our back. But the bottom line is, I think there's more uphill days than there are downhill. And for those very few that can really continue on with the tracking and the portion control and the real external limits year after year, God love you. I'm not one of those people. So I have to be vigilant all the time. So anyway, that's the article. And I'm going to start walking now, and hopefully there won't be wind noises.
Well, guess what? The good news for you is that there was wind and a lot of it. And even though I talked through it when I got home, it was so many noises. I said, I've got to re-record the last 10 minutes of this podcast. So anyway, the last 10 minutes was devoted to Charlize Theron, the Academy Award winning actress, who apparently has a new movie out, and in her publication or, advertising it, she's given some interviews. And apparently in this movie, she had to gain 40 or 50 pounds to play the role. And she told one interviewer that after the movie was wrapped up and over and her part was done, and she faced losing the 40 or 50 pounds, that she experienced depression for the first time in her life. Now, I think she's in her early 40s, maybe. So that's a long time not to feel depressed about your body. I'm telling you. I guess, most of us would be able to help her over this hurdle. But for her, it was first time out. And I guess she was very sympathetic with moms who did this repeatedly after having a child, then having to lose the weight. She herself has adopted children, so she's never given birth. And she was like, this took me a year and a half to lose the 40 or 50 pounds. And it was one of the hardest things she said she'd ever done. But the depression she experienced was singular in her mind. And I thought, for those of us who don't look like Charlize Theron, we know this depression. And it's just a part of our lives. She obviously won the gene pool with looks and with taking care of herself. And so she probably always had the outside world noticing her in a very positive way. But the downside of that is when you do gain weight, and in her instance, it was for the movie, but in many of us, it's just life. It's giving birth or just gradual gaining of weight. We're faced with how the world really looks at us in a different way. And it is depressing. And it's also a part of our landscape for those of us who have gained and lost and gained and lost. We know this territory. And I want to instant message Charlize and say, my dear, if you're 73 and you get offered a role where you have to gain 40, 50 pounds, just ask the wardrobe department to give you a little padding. Because if it took a year and a half for you to lose it when you were in your 40s, it's going to take you 5 years if you're in your 70s. And I'm laughing, but I'm not, because I know the hormones leptin and Gherlin operate for all of us, regardless of age. But I think when you're in my category of 73, the aging metabolism isn't working for me in the weight maintenance department. Now, you often hear about when you're older, you sort of lose your appetite. I haven't experienced that plateau yet, but I'm on the outlook for it. So I'm just faced with this Mrs. Mr. and Mrs. or Mrs. or whatever I'm going to call them, Gherlin and Leptin, as the my evil twins, and they're out to get me, but I'm not going to let them get me. And I'm going to do some practical things, like I'm seriously going to eat less. I'm going to be very conscious of portions this week. The problem with my normal 10 to 12,000 steps a day is that I think my metabolism now just is used to it, and it's not increasing my metabolism. So I've got to either increase more, and I go, realistically, Pat, am I going to do more than 12,000 steps a day, realistically? And the answer is no. I once walked 10 miles down in Washington a couple of years ago while try to go to every Smithsonian museum in one day. And, I could do it, and I didn't pay a price the next day, but I can't be doing, that kind of mileage per day. So it's got to be in the restriction of food, and it's not necessarily going to be food groups, although I am going to eat more protein, less processed foods, and really watch portions, because I think the eating less is my only way forward at this age and with this set of circumstances. So I'm not going to let these two hormones get the better of me. And honestly, we are just ruled by hormones our entire life. And even when they start disappearing in menopause, we have to worry about these other two. But I bet you that the pharmaceutical companies in the next 20 years are going to come up with synthetic leptin and Gherlin. That would be my guess. So be on the lookout for studies about that. But I do want to end on a positive note, because one of the real advantages of being 73 in this culture is that you are, or I am, and I think a lot of women will identify with this, you're sort of invisible to the world. I could be 40 pounds heavier. I'm not sure any more eyeballs are coming on to me than at my current weight. I'm just not as visible to the outside world. They discount elderly women and look past us. There's a freedom to it that allows me to really take a look at what role appearance can play. And it's not that it's gone. That's still in the mix of why I want to beat this leptin and Gherlin hormone gang that's trying to rule me. But I really do focus in on the independence that being able to do 12,000 steps a day gives me. And I want to preserve that. I don't want that to be jeopardized by letting this just rolling up the white flag. And I'm not one of those folks that can do the strict tracking and whatnot. I'm always negotiating this life and this daily situation, as many of you know from listening to me. every week I've got to adjust something. And so this week I'm going to adjust portions. I'm going to try to step up a bit, do a bit more walking. The weather is cooperating. And it is a joy to be walking outside without my Nanook from the west or from the north outfit on, and to hear the birds and smell the earth and look at the budding trees. It's a real joy. And my life could be much worse. I truly know that. And the challenges of portion control pale to some of the challenges some of you are facing and some folks that I know in my life are facing. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to try to put it together and make another week. So, P.S. I know we're still having some difficulties with the podcast being, posting, and particularly within the Apple podcast app. I've reached out to try to solve this. I can't seem to get any knowledge on it, because when they go and check in iTunes, all the episodes are there. So to them, it doesn't make any sense why your app would not be updating the episodes. And the only go round I can think of, and it may not work, but it's worth a try, is to unsubscribe from my podcast and then resubscribe. And it may be that that's all you need to do to tweak it. I use the free version of Overcast. It's a podcast app that I prefer to Apple Podcasts, but I'm just really sorry if you're having difficulty. And do email me at artofthediet@gmail.com and let me know if you're continuing to have problems. And if you solved it in some way, let me know and I'll pass it along. So that is it. I'm going to post that article link on the show notes page today, which is www.artofthediet.com/142. And I know the audio quality is so much better in here, but I hope you can understand that sometimes just walking outside is the best use of my time. And hopefully the first part of this, although I know it doesn't sound great, you can at least listen to it. And there is the biggest, reddest cardinal bird outside and giving me hope. So I wish you some hope this week, and I'll be back next week.